Welcome in, everybody. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just wrapped his testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing. So here's what he had to say when pressed about potential U.S. involvement in the conflict between Israel and Iran.
Most of what I can or should say would be reserved for a classified setting. I would say the president, obviously, any decisions on this matter are at the presidential level. He has communicated very clearly for quite some time.
I do understand that, Mr. Secretary, but my question for you is whether you have been asked actively to provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East.
If I had or I had not, I wouldn't disclose that in this forum, Senator. My job, our job, Chairman and I, at all times is to make sure the president has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications of those options might be.
I appreciate that.
You mentioned
Thank
the troops in the region.
I
maximum force protection at all times is being maintained.
So let's get to CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns. So what detail you have on how lawmakers are responding to that? You know, the big question is, will the United States get deeper involved in these escalating tensions in the Middle East? Will Congress be involved in those decisions? What are you hearing from lawmakers?
Yeah, well, Reed, there is a bipartisan group of lawmakers, some Republicans, some Democrats, who want Congress to be able to exert its constitutional authority on this. You have some proposals in the Senate, you have proposals in the House. The likelihood of those actually getting to a floor for a vote appear to be very slim at this point, because by and large, Republican leadership, reflecting the Republican Party base, they are in kind of a wait and see mode, giving the president deference here to make the decision that he needs to make with all of those options on the table, and then maybe later, as if and when this progresses, decide whether Congress should weigh in. But remember, Congress has been kind of out of the picture on this for a while, and even if they were to pass something up here on Capitol Hill, it's not quite clear whether it could actually matter. Remember, in his first term, President Trump went ahead with those serious strikes without consulting Congress, and Congress kind of taking the back seat here when it comes to war powers and any sort of intervention has long predated Trump. I mean, this is going back years that Congress has kind of ceded its authority on this issue, because it is just very difficult to get them all around some cohesive policy in support of having Congress exert its authority. So unlikely at this point, though there are growing bipartisan calls.
Well, switching gears now, there's a group of Republican senators who are leading that probe today on the health of former President Joe Biden. What is at the root of this, with so many pressing matters domestically and internationally?
Yeah, and a lot the Senate has to get done, including that big, beautiful bill the president wants passed by July 4th. But this is essentially an audit of the past administration, and it comes after a lot of new reporting this year, especially in that book that we've talked about recently about the president's mental acuity, who alleged cover-ups of it, who knew what and when. So there is a probe going on in both the House and the Senate. On the House side, they're very interested in the former president's use of the auto pen. But this hearing today, it's important to note that they have called witnesses that are past administration officials in past Republican presidencies, so not from the Biden administration. Now, the House has called upon Biden administration officials to come and testify. We'll see whether that happens, whether they are able to compel them to come forward. That will be really the crux of the conversation and the argument today is really just a first step, but also more partisan in nature.
Well, we have got to ask you about this, on the heels of that tragic and frankly terrifying shooting situation in Minnesota that left that state lawmaker and her husband dead, others wounded. Congressional members, we understand, are clashing over whether to up their own security. What is their sense of their own safety there as they gather on Capitol Hill? And is there bipartisan support for boosting security for our elected officials?
Well, Reed, there is no doubt that there are concerns, increased concerns about security. But when it comes to beefing it up or making it more robust, there are two big concerns that lawmakers up here have. One is that it's very costly. I mean, we're talking about nearly $1 billion in the budget for this. And two, it's quite cumbersome, or it can be. Having an expanded security footprint, there are concerns lawmakers have that would not enable them to have the kinds of interactions with constituents that they want to have, to be able to move around freely in the way that they want to. And so the costliness and the cumbersomeness of all of this has some lawmakers concerned about upping security. I should note, though, that this building that they work in, where I am now, is so heavily fortified. That's not necessarily the issue at play here. The issue at play is what the security looks like when they're back in their districts, when they're at home. Remember, this tragedy in Minnesota happened at the lawmakers' homes. So that's a bigger concern that these lawmakers have, especially the high-profile ones. But there are ongoing, requests for increased budget and security, but it's really back in their districts.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, always gold standard. We appreciate talking to you so very much here on CBS News 24/7. Hope to have you back very soon.